Okay, so we're going to be doing absolute value today. So before we understand what absolute value is, we're going to understand some numbers, positive and negative, on a number line. So it says mark a point at both 5 and negative 5. So this is 5, and then this is negative 5. Describe what you notice to the differences. So the difference is 5 this way, and then 5 this way. So they're equal distance between 0. So that's what absolute value is. So absolute value of a number is a distance away from 0 of the number line. And a distance cannot be negative. So if I give you an absolute value is just two straight lines. If you know your lines, these are parallel lines with a number in between. So here is negative 5. So this is how you read it. The absolute value of negative 5. So the absolute value of negative 5 is just 5 because it's 5 away from 0. It doesn't matter what direction it is because distance always has to be positive. So basically what this absolute value does is just tell you the distance from 0, which basically just takes away the negative sign. So use a number line to determine the absolute value. So absolute value of negative 8 will just be 8 because negative 8 will be here. So it's 8 away from 0. So the absolute value of negative 1 will be positive 1. And the absolute value of positive 3 is just 3. And the absolute value of negative 4.5 is just 4.5. And the absolute value of 6 is 6. So if it's positive, it stays positive. If it's negative, it becomes positive. All right, number 2, write the absolute value, describe the situation below. So New Orleans is 8 feet below sea level. So that'll be absolute value of negative 8, which is just 8. Mr. Simpson owes $563 on a credit card. So you write your lines, write negative 563 because he owes that money. And the absolute value of negative 563 is just 563. So absolute values can be compared. So compare the following absolute values. So the absolute value of 2.5 versus the absolute value of negative 2.5 means they're the same because they're just both 2.5. So the absolute value of negative 3.9 is just 3.9. And then this is 4. So 4 is greater. The absolute value is 6.25 versus the absolute value of negative 7.8. So this is just 7.8 and this is just 6.25. So it means that this is greater. Negative 16 over 4 is absolute value of negative 16 over 4 is just positive 4. And then this is positive 3.9. So it means that this is greater. Negative 24 versus negative 18 means that this is greater. And then a absolute value of negative 24 is just 24, and the absolute value of negative 18 is just 18. So it means that this is greater. So what do you notice about the problems of 8 and 9 above? Well, so 8 is just the regular, it has no absolute value. So the bigger the negative, the further away it's from 0, so the smaller it is. On number 9, it's the absolute value. So it's just asking the distance from 0. So since absolute value negative 24, it has a distance of 24 from 0. That means it has the greater value. Okay. So practice finding the absolute values by answering the questions below. So the absolute value of negative 16 is just 16. Find all values of x where x, the absolute value of x equals 11. So that means you can have absolute value of 11, or you can have the absolute value of a negative 11. They both equal 11. Find the values of x where the absolute value of x is 7/8. So you can have the absolute value of 7/8, or you can have the absolute value of negative 7/8. Find the numbers with an absolute value of 150. So that means negative 150 has an absolute value of 150, and then positive 150 has an absolute value of 150. So the absolute value of 8.9 is just 8.9. And then find two numbers who are 25.6 units away from 0. So you can have 25.6 or negative 25.6. And they both have the same distance of 25.6 from 0. So challenge. This is saying negative absolute value of negative 39. So the absolute value of negative 39 is just 39, but then that negative sign, this negative sign comes down, so your final answer is negative 39. This is saying absolute value of negative 44 plus 5. So absolute value of negative 44 is just 44, and then you add 5, so that'd be 49. This is saying 50 minus absolute value of negative 18, which is just 18. So you're going to do 50 minus 18, which is 32. All right, guys, that is how you do absolute value. Move on to your homework. Thank you.